Hello and welcome. Today's episode, I am talking about the Retired Astronaut and some framing of this consciousness and tell you a story. Hopefully, an entertaining story, a story that might make you giggle. And it has to do with the Retired Astronaut. It was about a year. So before Halloween of last year, a friend of mine rang me up, and at that time I was holding this meditation that I had gleaned from an online from this man named Infinite Waters. He does this great series, and I watched one of my friends at the new school recommended him, said he was very uplifting, and I started listening to him pretty regularly for a while, and really enjoy what he does, and I think he's a wonderful presenter. And one day he suggested to really look at life in such a way as to be very open and to allow, and by allow also do not, and the theme was do not block your blessings. Which, okay, so I'm holding this intention. I'm like, oh, okay, are there ways in which I'm impeding my own progress and resisting what may best benefit my growth? And so later on that day, I got a call from a friend, and we were chatting and catching up. We hadn't talked in a while. And at the end, near the end of the conversation, we were about to hang up. He's like, I'm going to ask you something. I know you're going to say no. And I'm like, well, today, yeah, I have no idea. You can just ask. And he said, well, I'm meeting with some friends down in New Orleans for Halloween. Do you want to go? And I really am very unfamiliar with the entire region. I've only been through New Orleans once in a 24-hour period, and that was like in the early 90s. And it's of interest to me, and it's also a region that is part of my thesis research, and so I thought, okay, because it's not far from this archival site that I was intending to visit anyway, up in Mississippi. So I was like, all right, and I also felt fear. I was excited about the idea of going, because there was a lot of unknown. It was very unfamiliar, and that's exciting to do something new. And at the same time, having been to New Orleans previously, I have the utmost respect for the culture and the people and the fertility, the energy here in New Orleans, as I experience it, is very fertile, and it's such that I knew, like, it really is best to just be very focused and open-hearted, and just keep the energy field in New Orleans. Like, there's a lot of love to plug into, and and I just, knowing that, I was like, I really wanted to be in the proper state to enjoy a Halloween in New Orleans. And so I challenged myself to do this. And meanwhile, I was like, well, I'm going to do some research while I'm down there. I made some calls, and I befriended a woman who's the founder of this organization. She'd been based in New Orleans, and she had just relocated back out to Bay St. Louis. It's on the Mississippi side. She's from Mississippi. It's a coastal town. It's a delightful coastal town. And she invited me to come out and stay while I was down here for Halloween. And you meet folks in the community and get to know the town and their mission, and see if an artist residency, because that's what we were discussing, would be a good fit. And that all went wonderfully. And actually, when I was preparing for the trip, though, I was a little, I'm like, oh my God, you have to come up with some costume, and it's New Orleans, you really need to step it up. Yeah, I'm coming from New York, and I'm still thinking, New Orleans, you gotta step it up. So I also was like, well, most of the time that I'm going to be there, I'm going to be, out working on this agricultural project. So these are, like, oh, okay, well, I don't know how to pack for this, and plus I'm not familiar with the climate and the region, and so I'm getting my suitcase together, and I'm just sort of like, what do I put in here? Like, what costume? And then I gotta, I may be like working in gardens, and so how am I going to do this? And then I'm also a tourist, and And so I pull out my suitcase and I get inspiration. And the inspiration was to pack my suitcase as if I were a retired astronaut. Which, is interesting guidance. It just sort of like, I was probably just talking to myself, like, how am I going to pack for this trip? And then this answer comes, and I'm like, okay. So, it meant, like, it was interesting for me because I went back to my closet and I started looking through my closet, and I was like, okay, I'm going to put on the goggles of a retired astronaut and look at my wardrobe and pick out the things that a retired astronaut might even wear. And actually, it came up to like kind of the perfect amount of clothes, just by my assuming like what a retired astronaut would wear, and then a perfect amount of clothes. And just packed them all in the bag, and and even like my costume came together, and a concept for my costume all came together, and it was beautiful. It was especially beautiful, too, when I on our way to the Mississippi community that we passed by, what I didn't know was there, but is a NASA and NOAA huge, test site where the rockets for NASA are tested first in this Stennis in Mississippi, and then they're sent over to Cape Canaveral, Florida, not knowing that the town actually is adjacent to this NASA site. It's this whole. So I'm like, oh, okay. So the retired astronaut theme really, is very kind of perfect just for the setting. I'm in this little town adjacent to, and they removed like 4 townships in order to create a pretty wide buffer zone. So you really just see a lot of forest. We went on a tour and we went to their climate, their climate museum and stuff like that. And it was fun. And Cape Canaveral, though, if you can go, I went the year before, mind-blowing, so incredible exhibits, interactive, it's incredibly curated, and it's just phenomenal, worth every penny. It's like $50 to get in, but it's like worth every penny. And I mean, if you're at all, if things like going to the actual Mars recruiting center, that isn't, if that interests you, like even as like a curioso, like what is that? What would that be like, or how are they marketing it? Like whatever perspective you want to look at it from, as a someone just in this space time reality, it's like a marker of like, oh, look where we live in the 21st century, and this is now a thing, and. So anywho, I'm staying now in Mississippi, right next to, and the artist residency worked out. I came back a couple months later and did my artist residency. And then toward the end of my residency, I came into New Orleans. My research led me into New Orleans, and I made some family connections down here. And was encouraged to attend the Tennessee Williams Festival. Because I might, in order to meet some of the researchers, like local researchers who might be help me solve a mystery that came up as part of my thesis, and now as a component of my thesis, having to do with making invisible identities visible. In this instance, a relative of mine who is queer, who nobody knew that he was queer. I mean, now I'm finding evidence that but. So I go to the festival, and there's a little queer festival within a festival called Saints and Sinners. Highly recommend it. Saints and Sinners, Tennessee Williams Festival, New Orleans, every spring. And while I was there, I befriended this really great guy. His name's Jeff Key, and he's a playwright and performer and an activist and a veteran, and he's out, and he's queer, and he's very vocal, and he has a big social media following. He's interesting, Jeff Key. Interesting man, a lot of fun, huge heart, just a big lover, just loves people and and animals and everybody, and is just like such a big-hearted human being who's just so much joy to be around. I can't say enough good things about him. And so I got to befriend him. He had just moved to New Orleans, and so we got to hang out and stuff. And then it came up in conversation because I sort of told him about this retired astronaut theme, because I could still sort of try this on from time to time, because it really is just in a sense, like a perspective or an assumed archetype or a way for me in which to um, enfold this broader memory that came through to me or has been coming through over the past couple of years. Um, it comes through in many different forms. It comes through in in artwork. It comes through in meditation. It comes through like I've done past life regressions and I've seen these lives in other worlds. And I and in some altered states as well. Ceremonial altered states. So there an increase in memory, a sort of different a changing paradigm of the sense of self and belonging and ancestry from Earth on out through the cosmos, and how to enfold this growing awareness of the multidimensional selves. It's very broad. uh, to kind of like, oh, now that's somehow a part of my personal story, and so I'm using tools such as the hero's journey, and some archetypical, examinations, mythology. There's a lot of really fun ways in which to explore this material, and again, it brings me back to the Retired Astronaut, because within that sense of identity, like if I want to just like cloak myself and bring that sense of identity in, because now if I think of myself as my existence, in the totality, the multidimensional self, as this explorer within the cosmos, who at this point in time, an aspect of this intelligence which is connected to everything else, of which we're all connected to, differentiating itself to have this 3D worldly experiences here, incarnate, with a soul contract, and part of that contract is this waking up, is this remembering and return to, what's known as the Christ consciousness self, the ascended self that understands what life and death really is, or the creation, how we're all creators and how we're all co-creators and how we're all God, and God, and we're responsible for everything, and we're also here on the forefront within our just where our sector where we are in space. We are evolving technologies, biological technologies. The body is a really good example. That are drawing upon, Carl Sagan talked about the stardust blowing here. Yes, I mean, so those genetic codes and all those, and with them the memories, are all a part of this world, and we're a part of this world, and therefore these memories, these libraries of consciousness, are available to us, and we are interacting with them all the time anyway, whether we're fully conscious of that or not. For me, it's just like a personal thing of like, this came to me, and this is a method in which I can draw upon this broader experience and begin to perceive reality from a meta place, as well as this very individuated place. And it's awesome to embody this energy and then realize what it's drawing toward me. Case in point. So this friend of mine, Jeff Key, that I was going on about, as it turns out, his cousin is a retired astronaut, and I was explaining my retired astronaut ideology with him, or worldview, or universal view, cosmic view, and it came up like his. It's a wonderful story too, how his cousin became an astronaut. His name's Jim Voss, and he told me about it, and I just realized, like, I had. Within a matter of months of not knowing any astronauts, or not knowing any friends or family of astronauts even, that I knew of, from stepping into this archetype and being willing to view the world from this way. And if you research retired astronauts, you realize they do some amazing things, once they've retired, the Institute for Noetic Sciences is a really, really great example right off the bat. But retired astronauts are awesome, So now I find like what I'm drawing to me is like artwork and things like the Everyday Astronaut. This is really, really great. artist and educator. He has a website. Highly recommend him. He's absolutely delightful. So these different, so I'm using this archetype, and these different symbols are showing up. For instance, the other day, Facebook feed, this book by Michael, and I may not pronounce your last name correctly, Altucher, and his book on Reinvent Yourself, which is fascinating, which I watched a podcast. I ordered the book online. Interesting concepts, and a lot of things that I'm like, oh yeah, I'm having some parallel experiences, and it's interesting to get between what's happening right now and what I call the self-guru movement on YouTube, which I think is powerful and is beautiful, and I say that with all due respect when I say self-guru movement, because I think it is about a personal sense of ownership of our emotional bodies, and therefore our actions, and therefore our consciousness, and everything that we're creating, and it is less and less in how we've been trained about giving power up and away, and more about realizing the depth of energy and power and creativity that we have within, and really allowing that to come forth in these greater ways. RA for me, and then Retired Astronaut, the play that I'm writing about the retired astronaut in order to help introduce this character. The experiences of being able to try that archetype on and watch how it changes my reality has just been a really exciting one, and it's the type of thing where I think these types of masks and these types of roles and archetypes are things that we can tune into as human beings in order to just have a better experience. Case in point, like say for instance, you've been invited to go out for the evening, and you're committed to going for whatever reason. It's a social obligation that you'd like to fulfill. And yet at the same time, you're also aware of your level of physical energy and your enthusiasm for it in that moment, and it's not matching up necessarily to where you'd like to be when you're around your friends, So one way would be to go, and hope that these people, being in their company will elevate you. Okay, that's fair enough. Another thing would be what are you bringing to the party? What energy are you going to come with? Are you going to come with that exhaustion and nervousness and complaining and or are you going to decide all right, I'm putting on my party pants or my party panties, or I'm putting on my party mindset, or I'm going to put on this outgoing personality that is authentically me. I'm going to put them in the driver's seat and I'm going to look for joy because I'm hanging around with people that I love, celebrating something I'm excited about. I'm going to put my attention there, put my party face on, and go. Because then I'm actually bringing something really beautiful to the party, and I'm adding to the energy, right? Rather than going there as a means to take away. The exchange will be so much more powerful. I'll definitely get energy in that exchange. It's and even if all that happens is I'm just there loving other people consciously in my heart and just enjoying their company, that alone creates an incredible experience for me to have. Just in terms of that awareness and that willingness and mindfulness to connect with others on a heart level. And the retired astronaut and that cosmic perspective and that viewpoint of the world, as I said before, this now to be true. It really, really helps in my day-to-day to be able to lightheartedly, look into the evolution of my consciousness and play in a meaningful way, really, really play and enjoy each and every moment. And I wish the same for all of you. Namaste.